All right, everybody, welcome. So I now call the meeting this Rules Committee of the Anchorage Assembly. Today is February 13, 2025. We're on the record from 1:45 to 3:45. I'll have to step off, I think, sometime pretty close to 3:15. The Dunbar principle is in effect that the 3:45 is a ceiling, not a target. And we'll go ahead and start with introductions.
Mark Littlefield.
Zach Johnson.
Daniel Volin.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant.
Felix Severa.
Meg Zelda.
We also have on the phone Mr. Martinez.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Anyone else on the phone? I don't hear anyone else. So we also have Legislative Services, the Clerk, Assembly Council. We have some folks in the audience, the Ombudsman. And today on our agenda, we have just a handful of items. So it's possible we get out of here early. I will start today. I don't know where Ms. Braga is. On Tuesday night, there was a parliamentary inquiry that was made, and it was essentially on the bifurcation question and whether or not it's both sides of the bifurcated question have to be resolved. There was some previous record that we had where there was a slightly different question that was before us, and it was determined that both sides have to be kind of resolved. And the only way it turns out that that's true is if they're dependent on each other for action. And so what that means practically is that the clerk who was on the phone at the time giving us advice was the right one and the chair was not. And didn't really make a difference in our deliberations because the decision was made on different grounds, not on that ground. And so, but I just want to put that out there so everybody knows that the bifurcation question means both items are treated independently and can be addressed independently. And so completely independently, depending on the subject, of course. And so with that, March is coming next month. We are going to be traveling to NLC, and there are 4 of us going this time. So we've rescheduled the Rules Committee meeting for next month so that it's going to be held at a time when we're here. And I don't remember the exact day we rescheduled to. Madam Clerk, could you find that for me?
Sorry,
What day we rescheduled next month's Rules Committee to? You know, tricky. We have a second for it, but with that, I don't really have much in a substantive way. We don't have any awards today. We're not doing any employees of the quarter or any of that stuff. Who just joined us on the phone? Ms. Braga. All right. Welcome.
Karen.
Thanks. Okay. Okay. So we moved it to Wednesday, 3/19, 1:45. So we just had to do that because a number of us will be gone, and we want to make sure that folks are here for that. Otherwise, I think I'll hand it off to, I don't see anyone from the administration. That's fine. I do see some attorneys, but they're the collateral branch. And there's police representative here. I see that. Welcome, Chris. Mr. Rosa. With that, I'll hand it over to the clerk.
Thanks. I was feverishly writing my report. The election team is been working with council, Muni Legal, the administration, and the GIS team, going over proposition language, the election database, the ballots, the public notice, matching the voters to the ballot styles, and the League of Women Voters ballot review with fine-tooth combs. We did find that in their final legislation that was passed in April, the state added a precinct, so we had to back up by 2 days and start over. And so we've gotten that resolved, and ballots have been ordered, and they actually will be mailed in less than a month. March 11th is when ballots are mailed. 11th. And that is all I really have right now.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Then we'll hand it off to Legislative Services.
Wonderful, thank you. We've been keeping busy. We always commit if members are leaving to really help them get their legacy projects done before they leave. So we have 4 very busy members leaving, and we are just hustling to help them get their stuff done. So that's been fun and busy. We helped with the Juneau visit last month, and we are tracking some legislative items that we reported on in the legislative committee. I don't know if you all know this, but Allie does a lot of work as our communications director for the elections communications. So she works really closely with William in elections and helps them. And then Ally's also been busy planning a joint homelessness summit with the Assembly's Housing and Homelessness Committee, Anchorage Coalition and Housing. Little mission change. They're now a NIMBY group. Anchorage Coalition and Homelessness, and then the mayor's office. So it's really cool, this collaboration. The invitation for registration just went out that you all got. I hope you all can come. There's a really great agenda, and it's a really neat way that they're approaching it, very for community members, not how to complain about it, but how to get involved in ways that they can volunteer and donate and learn more about the situation. And then we are working on new member orientation. We share that with the clerk's office, so we've been meeting and getting ready for that. I interviewed a lot of you and asked what to improve about orientation, and you all said, make it more intense. So we're gonna try to make it a little more intense, but hopefully a little more exciting too, interactive and that sort of thing. And then finally, we completed our 2024 accomplishments. So that is in your packet. And for us, it's just so fun. When we were in Juneau last month and talking with their staffers work for one legislator and get to work on that one legislator's politics and priorities. And it's so fun that we get to work for 12 of you and have such a broad range of things we're doing. And it keeps our jobs really exciting. And it's neat to learn so much about so many issues. So it was fun to look back on all that we have done on your behalf this year. And then I'll note on the third page, we started keeping statistics this year so we can get just some numbers behind what we do. And I think it's really cool that our attendance numbers have gone way up. At our events, we had almost 600 people attend assembly events last year. Another fun note I have is the number of press releases we did has luckily dropped because I started in, I think, very late September of 2021 and did 43 press releases that year. It was so crazy. And so that is one number we're glad to see down. We enjoy educating the community on what's going on, but it's nice not having it be house on fire every day. And then the newsletters, I was just meeting with staff in the administration saying, I love your newsletters. That's how I figure out what's going on. And so we are really proud of that. Hope you're sharing that with your constituents and taking advantage of the new opportunity that Ally put together for members to do district alerts. I think I've seen a couple of those come through, and it's really neat to see the district specific stuff in our newsletter. And then finally, we added the Assembly 101 trainings, and we gave that to 131 people last year, mostly youth. We did all of, I think, the 9th grade at Polaris or some school. We did like a whole assembly chambers full of kids. It was kind of crazy. So that's what we've been up to this last month and this year.
Now, interestingly, there was some conversation this week about the Assembly 101 trainings that might be at some point in the not too distant future a project with the mayor's office to do a Muni 101 process, which is like all the ways the public can engage with the municipality as a whole, not just the legislative process, because that's one part of it and their ability to speak and be heard, but also any number of things. And so that conversation about Assembly 101 is kind of evolving a little bit. On that note, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, first, thank you so much for this and all of your work. And just echoing, because I know I've emailed this, but I want to say it on the record too. I've gotten multiple compliments on the Assembly newsletter specifically from folks outside the city as well. People are reading it and really finding it valuable. So just again, shout out to our team. Thanks.
And we will be briefing on the plan and priorities. So ask if there are any questions on that to reserve them. Anyone else? Okay, well, go ahead and hand it to the mayor since she's here. Mayor LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all the members for having me here today. With back-to-back Assembly and Rules Committee meetings in 1 week, I'll keep it brief. Appreciated just real quick the comments about Assembly 101 and expanding that. I know a few years back when I was on the body, we had conversations about a potential Citizens Academy and how to knit some things together to provide exposure and engagement. And so, yeah, excited about picking that up. thank you all for the progress that we're making together on the 10,000 homes in 10 years goal, especially this week with the pausing of multifamily design standards at Tuesday's meeting. And big thanks to Meg and Anna, and I assume y'all are still on first name basis, Rules Committee meeting. Okay. Vice Chair Zelato, Member Brawley, thank you for your work as sponsors. We look forward to continuing to work with all of you on some specific housing and zoning issues over the next few months. I appreciate the courts reaching a quick and fair decision around the suit brought by the ACLU last week around abatement, recognizing the municipality's ability to abate camps that pose a threat to public health and safety. It's important to be able to use abatement as a public safety tool, and we will continue to use it when we need to keep the community safe, and recognizing too that, of course, abatement is not by any means the solution to addressing homelessness. Of course, ultimately, housing and supports are what we need to ensure we're working towards, and I thank you all for your work in that area. Later this month, on February 27, we'll be meeting with downtown businesses to hear their concerns and explore other ways we can work together to improve public safety and revitalize downtown. And then I also just want to reinforce that the 2025 Mayor's Community Grants are open until March 10. Please feel free to share the opportunity to apply with any nonprofits you think are making a positive difference in the municipality. And if you just, go to muni.org and click on the Mayor LaFrance icon, it'll take you to the page where you can apply. I know there was a question raised by a member. Do the grants have to, or the applications have to focus specifically on like homelessness? And no, we're asking applicants to consider how what they're proposing could help make progress in our areas of prioritization. And so this is part of an effort too to show the public value of these kinds of investments and what kind of outcomes, especially those targeted around priorities such as public safety and building our future and safe streets and trails. So that's all I have for today. So, Mr. Chair, I pass it back to you.
Thank you. And Ally, if maybe we could include a section of the newsletter that's going out on the mayor's grants. So it's an opportunity to share. Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your report. And next we'll head off. Anything from council?
Matthew Hurt, Legislative Council, just reporting that for the month of January, we submitted 19 pieces of legislation. Happily, 5 previously submitted pieces of legislation passed in the month of January. We also did 15 floor amendments and 8 laid on the table items. So all the law is happening. And on that note, happy to say that we anticipate having a legal intern in our office in the early June, late May timeframe. So we anticipate being able to grow the next generation of legislative council. And with that, concludes our report. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to my peers for agreeing to transfer a little bit of money from our branch to the Department of Law so that we could effectuate that. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, just a quick question. 15 amendments. Are you looking for us to increase that number?
No, that's actually meant to be more of a stat of shame. It's like golf. The higher the number, the worse it is, right? So.
Well, that just speaks to how perfect our legislation is. Thank you.
Ceiling, not a target. Ms. Ellis.
Yeah, just a plug for the legal department that we have an open position currently posted for another council. So if you know of anyone who might be a good fit, be sure to get that job posting out there. It is up on the Muni jobs page.
Next, for the branch, we'll have the ombudsman. Anything to offer?
Good afternoon. Thank you. I don't have so much a report as a comment. 60 years ago this year, at the age of 12, I moved to Anchorage from San Antonio, Texas, Felix's hometown. And, you know, people who know me know I'm not a winter person. I still don't like snow and ice. And I had always planned on moving back to San Antonio when I graduated from high school. But Anchorage kind of grew on me. I grew to love this community because of the natural beauty that we're blessed with and the people. So what I really love about this community is a sense of community and the people. And our office, more and more lately, my colleagues, May and Heather and I, have been hearing from members of the public who are frightened, they're nervous, they're scared, they're becoming afraid to engage with local government because of what's happening nationally. And we can't lose that sense of community that makes Anchorage such a special place. I hope I never live to see that. And it is so important at this point in our history, in our time, that the mayor, the administration, the assembly publicly reiterate that Anchorage is a welcoming, inclusive community where everyone is valued and respected. I was so inspired at Tuesday's assembly meeting by the resolutions that were on the agenda supported by the assembly and the mayor. And I think a lot of people, you know, for those of us who helped draft those recognition resolutions, we understand how important they are to communities and individuals who have frequently been written out of history or ignored by history. It is so important to them. And it's important that we publicly, through resolutions or through statements, reiterate the values that make us a great place to live, work, and play. So, you know, I was part of the group, our office was part of the group that did research to establish the Office of Equity and Justice. I researched offices across the nation. It's now the Office of Equity and Inclusion. I helped draft the AM that outlined the expectations for a chief equity officer. And I just want to say this is the point in our history where that office needs to be out in the community, to be engaging with the community. It's important that we don't allow the municipality of Anchorage to be bullied into changing who we are and what we are. Thank you.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. And it occurred to me on Tuesday when I was looking at a couple of those resolutions, how many of them are drafted by your office, really those recognition ones. And I know that's something that we all share responsibility and that we can draft those things, but I appreciate that your office continues to steward so many of those and making sure that we don't forget year after year that we are, like you said, recognizing all the members of our community and making sure that their stories are told. So thank you so much for all of your work and your office's work.
Definitely, thank you. All right, so that covers all of the kind of introductory reports. Then no unfinished business today. We'll move right into the finalization of the 2025 work plan, obviously pre-election and 2024 accomplishments. Claire, you have.
You're almost done. I sent this draft out to you all to review last week. As far as I can see, there's only one question mark left to cover. I think you will notice that some of yours I had to shorten quite a bit. I did leave your full thoughts in well, to back up, this document, the assembly really touches once a year. You create it, you put it out for the public to understand. But then we just have a kind of ugly Word document that we track throughout the year, which is also shared with the public, but not as pretty. And so in that Word document that we'll be reviewing quarterly going forward, that does have all the details of what you wanted to do, but I condensed a lot of things. So just double check and make sure I got the spirit of what you wanted in these, especially the priorities. Jennifer Veneclassen wrote very nice descriptions of the priorities after you gave them to her last month, but I had to chop them pretty short to fit the space. So that's what you should review this for at this point. And then you would change the title to good government for your priorities from quality municipal services. And so I think at the last meeting, you had discussed whether you wanted to change that goal area to good government or leave quality municipal services. So that was the last thing to make a decision on. Any thoughts?
I'll just say good government is better, in my opinion, even though the grammar might be a little weird, but it just, quality municipal services feels pretty didactic to me. Anyone else with an opinion? Yeah, I mean, that's what she asked about, or anything else really, but that was her open question, so. I do appreciate now that we've kind of tied in the committees underneath the priorities and, the next step to that might be the departments under the committees, right? That might be, I know it's getting. Right, I know it's a little tricky to get it all on here, but it might at some point be a way for us to show very visually where we intend the department heads to engage with us, so. That'd be the only addition I would add.
Chris, I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Cameron.
Yeah, just well, and I want to connect with you after this, I think more so because I haven't had a chance, but just the relationship between the mayor's priorities. And that's just the question is that the, I think the headers match really well. I mean, obviously, but I'm wondering about the content in it and what is there, was there a sort of an alignment of that, of like looking through the specific work that's being done for the administration in terms of these areas and whether that aligns to what we have in here?
For good government or for all of it?
For all of it.
Yes. So the document I referred to that you will track throughout the year is a Word document. It has columns of who's point person from the assembly. Last year, you asked me to add a column for the administration. So once this is final, I will send that to them and so they can mark up their notes of who's working on what item and who's in charge. And so that'll give you a really good view of what the overlap between assembly and administration priorities are.
I think my question was that are the a crosswalk between what actual the bullet points under each one of them, and are those different from what the administration is working on under that heading, or are they the same, or are they aligned? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
And I guess we won't know until the administration's written on that document, but then it'll be really clear because these bullet points are all in a table in that document. And so each bullet point will line up to the assembly member that's working on it, any updates we've had, and then the administration person who's working on it.
Okay, cool.
At this point, these are just the assembly's
Just for
priorities.
us, right? That's what I understand. Okay, great. So that clarifies that then for me. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Ms. Otto and Ms. Barley.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's on legislative services to make the choice. If we want to crosswalk or call out the mayor's places where they are collaborative, we did talk about it last rules or rules before about trying to see how we're wording them to see if we can pull some of the same language together. That's why that good government is there. So I don't want to put them in an awkward position for having to reconcile two branches of government's plans.
Yeah. Well,
And so I just want to mention it was
specifically,
thoughtful, like in terms of we were starting to think about those
Cool.
things.
Yeah, I'm just, and this is a live document that it can adjust and change over time. That's great, because I think that, like, for instance, a couple of the things I know that have already been put out with homelessness, and I think the things are coming out soon around public safety. It'd be wonderful if we can kind of find a natural merging of those things. So we're both working on, if we're ultimately doing the same work, we're just not calling it the same thing or wording it the same. So anyway, so as those things come out, I'm happy to help with that.
And I don't know, the administration's not here to say, but I don't think it'll be too hard because
Yeah,
we're just going to
right.
give them our list and then they can write notes on what things they're working on. And then the next month you look at it and you say, oh, someone wants to work on it with the administration. I'm going to work on that instead of this other project that the administration isn't interested in. Is how you could use it.
Ms. Barley.
Yeah, thanks. I think so as I'm thinking about Cameron's comment, one thing as I go through here, maybe it's even adding a different bullet or something, because I think a number of these are actually joint projects. So I'll just call out one, the tax incentive one is something that, some of us are working with the admin on. They're really leading. There's other ones in here with the port, obviously. So maybe there's ways to connect it that way too. And then I think there's other things that are distinct lanes of work for us, the smooth transition of a large class of new members, for example. Anything under assembly business is our job, right? But I also think I appreciate this document, and I think it's just a tricky thing because we're not an advisory board, we're not a board of directors, right? Like we do act as a group, but we're also 12 legislators. And so my understanding of this document in terms of priorities is it's the big picture stuff that we have worked on. And also it's what all 12 of us have said we want to do. And so it's on all 12 of us to actually do the things that we say that we put on this document, right? But also I think it's just really trying to find that balance because we're a body and also we're a legislative body. And so it behaves differently than you would do this at like a nonprofit or something, and not to just pick on nonprofits, but I think that's really always the tension in this document. And because it's really all of us committing to what we're going to do for the year.
I have myself in the queue just to add that, there are a number of items that are separate and distinct. And there are a number of items that are shared. And I think that this reminds me of the process we go through annually for the legislative program, that there are a number of priorities in the districts and individuals have them and they're called out in some ways and they exist and are derived from our own internal processes. And then we have the administration with their very clear priorities that they have and they continue to hammer at every turn. And then there's this document that kind of lists up the things that we all agree. These are the big picture priorities, which I think that when Mr. Rivera was chair, we started to do some of this work around our number one responsibility, which is the budget, because the budget ultimately is the thing that does paint where we are working together and what our priorities are. And that is to, in July or a little bit sooner, begin a conversation, have a drafting of a resolution and an internal conversation about all these priorities that we hand to the administration before August, so that in August, and as they're working towards the 120-day memo, we have a first opportunity to communicate with them about where our priorities are for the year in relationship to their priorities, so that when we get into the budget, we can have a harmonious process instead of two distinct budget processes that we saw happen a couple of times. And so I'm hopeful then that maybe the outcome is a third document. I hate to make people chase documents, but it's like a third section of your Word document that is like, and that gets back to my point, like which department heads report to which committees, like creating that alignment, I think is a super high value opportunity for us to become a higher performing municipality. So I'm kind of in both worlds on that conversation. Mr. President.
Yeah, and I don't think this is going to be a very popular comment, but I think that this is, first of all, much appreciation to all the work and everything, but I think that this is in my sense, as I think about the next few years, part of the problem. I think that we've gotten into a stance as an assembly to be driving all of these sort of actions. And I think that some of that's good, really important that we drive things, certain things. But it really, I think ultimately, I'd like to see us as a city finding what as a municipality, both assembly and administration, finding our collective priorities to the degree we can and moving those forward. And then thinking about individually, if you have a project or you have a project, that's great. If two of you have a project, that's great. But that's why this is confusing, because this isn't really our collective priorities. I mean, I don't think all of us are all in on all of these things. And I think that that's the challenge. And I also think that it's a lot of energy driving all of these things. And if our energy was full focused in fewer things, then I think that we would get a lot more done. So generally speaking, I think that over the course of the next year, I'm certainly going to be advocating for greater focus and not restricting anybody from doing what they want to do and moving projects forward and doing the things that they want to do, but as a collective body, I'd rather us have much fewer priorities and align those to the degree we can with the administration. So that's just where I'm at.
Thank you. I have a few people, since he hasn't spoken yet, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thanks. So I just want to give a little bit of history on this document and where it comes from. So back in 2019, when I was chair of the assembly, and I believe you were on the assembly at that point, Cameron. So we went through quite an extensive process to come up with a strategic plan. It was a 5-year strategic plan for the assembly. It was a lot of work. What we decided to do once that, and I think actually it was 3-year, not 5-year, 3-year strategic plan. Once that 3-year strategic plan was done, what we decided to do was rather than come up with another 3-year strategic plan, that we would take 1-year bites. And so that is when this work started. And I really do appreciate this work. I think what this, I think in the end, it is up to a majority of the assembly to decide what areas of work we want to focus on and what that looks like. And so the getting, you use the word focus. The focus is really up to us. And we use this, I think, sort of roadmap of what we hope to achieve in 2025, I think, as a guidepost. And sometimes things transition from one year to another because it didn't get achieved that year, because maybe there just wasn't the time, the energy. We've had so many discussions around that. But I think in general, this gives both us internally and the community externally a good guide to what we as a body are putting forward as our priorities and what we as a body hope to achieve. I think, as Member Brawley, as Anna stated, like, this isn't the whole universe of things we're going to do, obviously. We're every agenda, there's other things that aren't even on here. But if we are intent about communicating some type of priority, some type of vision to the community as a legislative body, which I believe we should, I don't have any qualms with us putting our stamp as the legislative body, then I think this is a good way for us to do that. Thanks.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, I'll just give one concrete example. And I do appreciate, I think it is tricky because, as I said, we're a legislative body. So how do we document and make concrete what we intend to do? On the housing front, on that point about kind of the municipalities plan, for months, I have been asking the administration, essentially, given that we have a housing action plan that was adopted in December 2023, and we have been working on, given that there is a mayor's 10,000 homes strategy, how do those two documents talk to each other? So my original advocacy was, I do believe we should have one municipal plan and brand it as such and discuss it as such that merges those with distinct lanes of work. However, the answer consistently has been, we don't want to do that. They would prefer to have two separate plans. And I think that's an ongoing conversation, but just as an example, it is a two-way street to get to where you're saying. And I think that is one concrete place that I'm going to continue to try to find the balance, because I think it's confusing for the public to say we have two different plans and why they're different. But again, it takes both branches sitting down and committing to doing that in a unified way. So, and I should say too, I should characterize it not that they are resistant to working with us, or a lot of the content in their plan is from our plan. But they're two different documents right now. And so I do see that there's going to be an issue going forward with describing it in a unified way. So we're still working through that one. Thanks.
Ms. Salatil.
Yeah, Cameron, I'm really glad you brought this up, because we've had this conversation a little bit obliquely on the dais, and I've been a little bit confused. So I'll kind of jump to the end. I have some resolutions I hope to put some work in action that will live on past my very short time remaining. So I'm trying to get a better understanding of this like concept of roles. So as a policymaker who knows that there are things that could be fixed in the municipality and knowing that there are a number of ways to go about doing that, I can call that out by resolution and ask if the administration will take it up. I can try to leverage a board or a commission. Are you saying that those types of things we should only do if the administration is game? And then the other question I have is, or I guess it's more of a comment, I kind of like when we all throw our ideas out there and we work together, because I think I'm a little bit concerned with not getting a diversity of opinion and a diversity of approach. I will tell you that a couple of the more bold housing moves we have made as a body, which I'm very appreciative of, weren't favored when they were originally introduced as legislation. And sometimes it just takes that as a catalyst to get the negotiations rolling or whatever it might be. And it's sometimes hard to do branch to branch work in an open and transparent way versus straight up negotiations on the dais or through work session conversations when you have a pending piece of legislation. I appreciate the work that happens in work groups often, but that work gets so deep and isn't always inclusive of all the right voices that I also worry about that being the only way we produce legislation, because by then it feels like it's, to use George's favorite analogy, a fully baked cake, but it feels it could be missing something. So I just want to get a better sense, because I think we have different approaches and that's great, but I think we've kind of been dancing around this issue for
Yeah.
a couple of meetings.
Yeah, no, I really could kind of respond to great. Well, on the resolution front, I think I don't think that we should not do resolutions. I mean, I think we should do resolutions if we want to do resolutions, and I don't think we have to be in line with the administration to do the resolutions. I think that the resolution process and how we use it is, I think, we're all going to have different opinions in terms of how we do that. And so that one I'm less concerned about, because I think that I prefer to not do it, in terms of I'd like to compel the administration to do something. I'd prefer to go and try to sit down with the administration and try to get them to do that thing. And if they don't do that thing, then I can do a resolution. But that's been my approach. And I don't know if we've always done that. On the issue of this, which I think is really helpful, and thank you for the opportunity to clarify, because I think on the headings, I agree, these are definitely our priorities. And I think they're the administration's priorities too, which is wonderful that we have some alignment there. And I think underneath are a variety of different projects and actions and things that some people are doing and other people are not doing, but we're sort of throwing a lot of things in there that relate to that priority. And there's probably a lot more that we could add there. So they're not necessarily, if I were to publish this document, it's not necessarily that these are the 6 things that are going to move homeless forward or move, infrastructure forward. They're just sort of the things that we put here, and they're projects that we're working on, and there's probably more. And so as a communication tool, it's a little confusing to me, because some are really specific, really like, I'm going to go create this one document and do this one thing. And others are, we're going to create this whole big coalition and do this stuff. So it's a little bit confusing for me as a reader to understand how these 6 things got under that header, and whether that is, all what we're doing or a few of things what we're doing and who's doing that sort of thing. So that's, I think, just my confusion in terms of the purpose of this versus, for instance, under housing, there are probably 3 or 4 major sort of areas that we're focused on, right? Removing barriers, right? That's a major sort of area. And there's some major things that we're doing to sort of improve the opportunity to build more housing, that sort of thing. So these range from very specific targeted things to larger things. So that's, I guess, my only feedback here is that yeah, and again, it doesn't have to be the way I want it to be. I'm just giving some sort of feedback on it. And so it doesn't feel as much like a strategic approach as it does as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strategies with some examples of things we're doing in that strategy. That's how I'm seeing this, as opposed to these are the strategic actions we're taking to accomplish that thing. So that's, I guess, what I was trying to say. I don't know if that made more clear, but that's the feedback that I'm getting. And the last thing I'll just say is that my comment about the problem is that as a whole assembly, there are probably under each one of these 1 or 2 things that we all could probably, and the administration could probably focus on for this year. Like there are some sort of big ticket items or things that we could go in housing action. What are a couple of things that all of us, both the administration and the assembly, could get through that would really be meaningful this year, that would really push that needle? And so that's what I was looking for, is like, that's what I meant by focus. Not to not do all these things, but what are those key things under each one of these that we could align with the administration on and really get done this year? That's what I meant.
So I have a couple more folks. Thank you, Claire, and then Daniel and myself.
I won't wade into this debate, but I did want to maybe provide some more nuance on this document. When we first started it, I remember talking, well, I think some of you said, like, how can I possibly sign on to this document if that crazy person from the district across town is going to have their stuff on here? And it's not so much the assembly supports each of these issues, but I think you support each other in working on them. I think that was one where I talked to someone who's like, there's no way I support that. But I'm like, well, do you want to get it, into an AO and vote it on so you can get rid of it? And they're like, yeah, that's a priority for me. So I think it's just a commitment that you support your colleagues as they work through these. And then it's an evolution. We started with this document that we did at the beginning of the year and then didn't look at it till the end of the year. And then last year we really looked at it about once a quarter. And it was good to prompt people of what you wanted to work on, what you hadn't thought about, what's not important anymore. And I think those discussions were valuable for you. And then for staff, this is really helpful. I think as we got an assembly that's a lot more active and we have a lot of staff, we were finding that we were stepping on each other's toes a lot or not knowing what to work on. And so I think having this and I wouldn't say this is like a random sample of things. I think these are the bigger things. There are some side projects that come, but I think these are the big things. And these are all like on the document we review annually, there's names by each one. So these are all things that people have committed to work on, and then it's all in one menu. But anyhow, for staff, it helps us know what's more important to work on than someone's new bright idea that might not go anywhere. And then I guess finally I'll add, like I said, this is an evolution. And if you want to, with the new body, have a retreat and become more focused, that certainly is an option. This Legislative Services has organized retreats for you in the past, and we'd be happy to do that again if you want to do that once you have the new body after the election. I also had one other thing. Before we were really using this document, I think maybe a lot of members on the assembly might want one certain thing, and we're kind of working towards that. And then another member jumped the gate and got an AO introduced that kind of sidetracked that. And so this just allows you to kind of look ahead for what's coming for the year and maybe plan the order of things you want to work on too. So that is what I have to say about that.
Daniel.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's helpful to hear how this has utility for staff and just tracking projects. I think for me, it's helpful just to kind of know what are people working on, even if I don't support. I mean, the very first one on the list is something I did not vote for, but just to kind of know it. So maybe it's just putting within this document like a subheading, like ongoing projects, right? So there's the priorities at the top, which I think we can pretty broadly agree, all of us, that these are some good priorities for the assembly. And then there's the goals. And what I'm anticipating is that the goals is not every bullet point of legislation. The goals are just the broader headings, which I think is good. But yeah, I mean, to Cameron's point, it is interesting. Like there's things on here that are we communicating that we're all committed to this, each item? Probably not. But things are in play. And then going back to the debate for a moment, I think it is really helpful and a good idea to see where there's alignment between the branches. And I think this is like a helpful communication to be able to turn over to the administration and say, hey, here's the things that our body is interested in working on, projects that are ongoing. How can we sync up on some of these? In terms of the assembly being in the driver's seat on policy, I think that there's a give and take there. And I will say, at this current moment in time, my personal view is that we have a fantastic mayor who's committed to good government and rebuilding our departments. And, I'm thankful for that, but, that's something that can change over time too. And although I'm sure that many of my constituents represented or voted for our mayor, I don't see it as they vote for me to support our mayor. I see that they vote for me to work on solutions for Anchorage and to work on solutions for my district. And so I think bringing those priorities to the table as an advocate is very important as well. So, yeah, I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Felix.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the sort of suggestion made by Cameron. Perhaps it's too late in the game to mess around with this, but maybe in the future. So purposefully, I know that we don't put these in any order, if I'm correct, right? It's all in a random order. If there was enough alignment in the body, I could imagine that we could raise one or two of these as strategic initiatives, call it what you want. That might be something to explore in the future.
We just need to invest in, I don't know what it is, A16 paper in order to expand it to the point where we're able to capture all that information. Go ahead.
Just really quick,
Yeah.
because again, this is great. I mean, I think, but what I think this is really helping me to understand that this is sort of like a strategic plan and a work plan, right? And it's both, right? And there is a middle layer that would be fun to explore if there are, under each one of these there are three like areas. I mentioned like housing, like removing barriers or incentivizing housing. Like that's really what the strategic action is. And then here are the things we're doing to do that. Or if under homelessness, right, we're trying to create a better shelter system for our city. We're trying to, like, those are the strategic actions we're trying to do. And then here are the projects and things we're trying to do under that. So I think there may be in the future an opportunity to do that. That way, when you publish it, the community is like, oh, so under that priority, here's three things that they're really working on. And I think you could probably find language that most of us would be like, yep, that's lowering barriers for housing is probably a good thing, right? So anyway, I just an idea for us to think about for the future.
Daniel mentioned also maybe categorizing or having some kind of indicator that showed kind of status. Am I understanding that idea correctly? Or at least like what's working in progress, that kind of thing. So last year we started to roll out on a quarterly basis, updating the public facing document and replacing those bullets with either check marks to say that had been done, or that a little like wheel to show that they were in progress. So that's something that we'll continue to do in 2025. And then I do think, at this point, the 2025 progress report work plan will be, I think, the third year that we've used this format. And we found different ways to differentiate year by year what the format looks like. I love the kind of creative project of thinking about how else to format this in a way that better speaks to your specific goals under each header. And then, recognizing that there are kind of varying levels of the depth of each of these action items, that they could be just listed as actions.
Right. I have just a few more thoughts, Claire. I'll issue a correction for you. We do not have a lot of staff. We have more staff than we've had. I just want everyone to be really clear. No, we do not have a lot of staff. It's a very tight department. We aren't even barely a percentage of what the administration has. And so we're a tiny little fierce organization with a large reach, but we don't have a lot of staff. I would just be really clear for everybody, and it doesn't need saying, you all know it, but no past assembly could constrain a member from working on any legislative project in the future. There is value in somehow cataloging the projects that are ongoing in a number of ways so that, you know, our attorneys used to have to seek permission to communicate with other members when they were working on parallel projects. Why we created this committee, one of the reasons, or at least the function in this committee, to brief people on what we're working on. So we stopped the redundant action and forcing an attorney to work with two people on the same project in two directions without having some conversation. So there's this efficiency element to it. And the simplest reality of them all is, at least for 2 years running now, we have adopted this by resolution. And so it is in fact a document that the assembly has adopted. It takes 7 members to do that, not 12. Nothing we do requires unanimity. And yes, it needs to be clear somewhere in there that we have a header, some language about the purpose of the document and what it stands for, what it does, what it isn't, maybe some of that language to help the public understand. And I could give a case study on the animal care and control thing. The one of the highest values of this is when the administration does see it and we have an opportunity to finally build that working relationship. I get this question all the time. Wait, you want that how soon? Right? Like, because they operate in this constrained environment as well. And the one that comes to mind is the animal care one that I finally got on there this year. Like we passed a resolution and I'm grateful for the support. And in it, I said, we need a preliminary plan by April something. And in their minds, I said to them, we need a full and complete capital development plan for the replacement of that facility by April. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need a preliminary approach. And so there is an opportunity with this tool and the third document that will eventually come, the unified kind of work plan that will help relieve some of this fear of kind of the upstairs of like, how can we get all this done when we can't? And also some of our impossible expectations on time. And so there's something very valuable about people having realistic expectations of time on the staff and what can be accomplished. Because we all want it and we want it now. And I know why, because the clock is ticking. But the reality is we live in a resource constrained environment. And that actually, I think if there's something else, leads us to the next item on the agenda, which, oh, go ahead.
Just a couple edits I think I'll make based on this discussion. Somewhere in there, I'll write maybe a little disclaimer explaining a little bit more about it, wherever I can find space. And then would it help to change that 2025 goals to a different word besides goals of work plan or projects?
On the far right in gray.
It's light gray on this. It's a little brighter on the color document.
Yeah, and it is more projects.
Mark's got it.
Mark, go ahead.
You're-
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, that's the word, yeah, projects or work plan, or, you know, any number of different words could go there. Work plan would have time.
You know, one thing I'm worried about, I mean, to be frank, is it says public safety.
Your
Your mic is off.
Your mic is off.
It says Public Health and Safety Committee. I'm not sure we're gonna work on any of that. So that's what, I mean, I don't have a plan to work on most of that, so I don't know who is and where that's gonna be done, but that's not my agenda for the Public Health and Safety Committee. So that's the challenge, is like, why, I mean, maybe some of it, but that's the thing but maybe it's because other members will bring it to that committee, right? And that's their plan to like, I'm gonna bring it to that committee, but I just wanna like go, oh, okay, I didn't know that this is our agenda for the year. So that
So
was,
interestingly, Cameron, you bring that up, the committee above it, Quality Municipal Services, and that line, quality of life. In some ways, we stood up the Quality Municipal Services Committee to address kind of the Muni Committee's audit and some things that needed to be addressed. And then Felix was handed the chair, and which is his prerogative, he started doing the work of quality of life, which is all the parks and all the other departments that are kind of this outward facing, and those things that are the other elements on that list that aren't related to public safety or public health, right? And so I think there's actually, you would either tag quality municipal services as another committee under the public health, safety, and quality of life. Add that there so it isn't looking like we're expecting that committee whose job it is public safety, which would be aptly looking at community involvement in policing, fire, those kind of things. And then another
Upgrade at
committee.
Chugach Senior Center. I mean, I don't know if
That's more of a quality of life,
I
right?
guess it's a quality of life.
Yeah, and so, and it's also a municipal asset, and there's seniors who are living there, and so, yeah, and so, right, so it's not really under the rubric, it could be public health. So you hit on something really valuable there, that the committees that are identified there are close but not quite. And again, the departments, I think that's a really valuable exercise to go through to see where they fit, because that I think will help us to see what's missing. Meg?
We're not a siloed branch of government. Like, I want to kind of just say that out loud. We're not departments. We have fluid projects that are going to cross multiple committees and multiple structures. And sometimes something will go to a committee because it's the best fit or the best timing. And like, let's not lose that fluidity in trying because of what we want to put on a piece of paper. That's part of our strength.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's why I just
Oh.
think these are just projects. Like these are just a list of projects that are happening that fit that priority.
But so some of them are projects and some of them are broader action categories. And so tax incentives, that's probably 10 projects, right? And so building code alternatives, many projects. You know, there's anyhow, each one of these, there are some that are very discrete. Strengthen and protect Anchorage elections is a very broad set of things. It's not one project. And so some of these are though, like the capital plan for the animal care, the Alaska Center for Treatment updates. Those are very specific projects. So, and maybe there's some review and analysis under these that might identify some that are more of those broader categories versus the specific projects, but that's more work than we have for today. And on last notes.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, staff circulated this to all members on Wednesday, the 5th, and asked for feedback. And it looks like they are looking for feedback through the addendum deadline, which would be the 20th. So again, if there's things that we do not like in this document, it is on us to submit comments as well. Thanks.
All right, now, the next item is this little table here with nothing on the top of it but numbers, which really gets to both points and pulling in either direction depending on how you look at it. I asked the clerk to go back and do a summary for us of the legislative history for the last 10 years. And by legislative history, I don't mean content. I mean, how many projects have we passed through our hands as a legislative body? And if you start back on the far right in 2024, it's like somewhere between 1,400 to 1,600 legislative items. That's AIMs, AMs, AOs, ARs, and emergency ordinances. And so that's all of them together. So, and then if you move up to the last 3 years, their average is like 1,650 to 1,900. And so there has been a marked increase in productivity. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to every member to think about what that means for them. And that's including, again, the key functional areas for our legislative work is the AO and the AR, sometimes the AM for awards of money and contracts. But if you really look at the work that's being done, we're staying pretty consistent over time. In fact, Mr. Rivera and I joined the body in 2017. There was a peak, an increase in the number of ordinances and resolutions, or actually, yeah, and then it stayed pretty consistent. So I just wanted to put this before you to see the breadth of the work from a data analytics perspective. So I don't know if anyone wants to talk about that, but that is for your, if you tie these two things together, then you start to see some good information. Anna.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to know, and obviously there's a lot of pieces in this, and then like, for example, emergency orders, obviously that really speaks to the point of time that we were in 2020 and so on. But on the AMs, the one thing that I've been wondering that is not to solve today, but I wonder if some of that bump in the number of AMs was the contract approval threshold. And I know that that was lowered significantly. I know it was lowered. And I know that's not an immediate thing to, I think it's a conversation to have of kind of what that should look like, especially given inflation, right? So when you have a dollar amount threshold for anything, it changes over time. But I just want to point that out, not because that's something we do today, and I understand all of the reasons why that was put in place. But I think it's just something to think about, and it might explain specifically the AMs, because I think those all come through as memos, unless it's a much larger appropriate. No, I think appropriations are ARs, and I know the clerk may have to, or want to talk about that.
So, oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Well, I apologize. I was writing something down when you were speaking, so I didn't catch the last little bit that you were saying.
Okay, I just will jump on there
Yeah, yeah.
and say that, moving us to the next item on the agenda, unless anyone wants to stick to this, hold on. I'm gonna draw a thread that, in fact, a project that you should be seeing any day, introduce a project between a few assembly members and Bill upstairs, whatever his title is, administrative officer, is a complete revision of Title VII. And so, which is the purchasing code, and we have a proposal coming forward that will change those thresholds if the body agrees, that will, again, restore some of that fluidity and the kind of less things we will have to take action on. And so you're on the money there about the appropriating AMs and the fixes coming stat. So just to your point, so go
Just
ahead.
as a complete
Sorry.
joke though, real quick, is that you joined in 2016, you said?
2017,
2017, where the ARs jumped by 50.
yeah.
And then,
Blame this guy.
and then Meg, and you and I joined and jumped by another 50. So just 100 more AMs just between the
The four of
three
us.
of you. The four of you.
Hey, you're in there too, Cameron.
That's right.
Yeah, you're in there
I don't
too.
think so, but I'll take the credit even though I don't get it or don't deserve it.
Jamie.
Well, I do have something important to say, but I was gonna make a quick joke about Daniel Volin joining in 2022 and maybe not, no.
50 more.
But the clerk's office touches each of these documents 5 times. We save them to a folder, we send them to Reprographics to be printed, we assemble the paper packets, we stamp the disposition, and then we save them to a finalized public folder, which then a web crawler comes through and puts on the portal. And that does not account for amendments, postponements, or referrals. So that's part of my staff report as well, this is what the agenda team does.
Right, and by, just to really cue in one thing you said there, if an item is postponed, then they touch it again in the next packet. And so that means those numbers just increase, and it is our favorite motion to postpone. And so I think if you were to do some data analysis, it's our favorite motion outside of the consent agenda. And so if you scrub out the consent agenda, we do that the most. So lots of work, and this work is core mission work. It's how the legislative process works. It's how contracts are awarded. It's how money is spent. It's how taxes are levied. It's how bonds are approved. It's how, or not approved, proposed. It's how all that happens. And so this little table here is very good information. Go ahead. And then Daniel.
Yeah, I think on the point about postponement is interesting. I think one thing that we found, setting aside the content of the ordinances, but if you remember, myself and Vice Chair Zalatel, and on 2 of the 3, Member Voland, we introduced things in October and then intentionally set the hearing date to at least 2 months in advance. And so I think that's another, not that everything merits that, but I think it's something to think about as a tool that, avoids having to postpone things serially, especially if you know that there's going to be additional work, or if you want to refer it to a committee or just whatever timeline you have. So that's just something that I think we should all as members remember as an option, and doesn't require polling. We just have to say, please set the public hearing for this date. So it doesn't create a bunch of paperwork in the interim. Thanks.
Daniel. Meg.
Yeah, so this is interesting data. So, 2020 COVID starts, and really a lot of the municipal business kind of shut down, right? We were just in the emergency posture. And then I think it's interesting in 21 and 22, we kind of came out of an acute emergency, but we were dealing with all of those federal dollars and kind of the fallout, the pieces of the safety net that broke during a pandemic, including on a policy front. And then it seems like by the end of 2022, COVID was kind of done. And in 2023, I'd be really curious, like, what the heck did we do? Like, there's nothing, well, we did a lot, but I'm just trying to think external to our own business. Like, what prompted, oh, we added Matthew. That's it. He called it out. So we added capacity and we filled the capacity. And then 2024, 1883. I am racking my brain about what emergency ordinances we would have passed in 23 and 24. This is part of the problem with that pace of business, is trying to remember snow. Okay, in 23.
Purchases.
Yeah, and I can look in the portal, but what I'm trying to say is with this pace of business, remembering what we've done is really, really hard. I would encourage all members occasionally to go and look at your own legislative record. I'm getting, as I mentioned, a little nostalgic and going back and looking or seeing if I had something I wanted to do and haven't gotten it done yet. And just the pace of the work, I think, will astonish you. Even though you're living through it, we get so used to it sometimes. And it's good to go back and reflect on it, because I've gone back and I've looked, and a few of these numbers, probably things that maybe shouldn't have been brought. But that's part of learning as a legislator too. So so I was just looking at it and thinking about the larger world context as we look at these numbers, that like what affects us externally.
There's nothing that teaches you better as a new legislator than putting some hot lava onto the agenda and then having it come at you.
Yeah.
Every one of us learns in our own way that lesson. And it's the same. I feel feelings for some of our staff in particular up on the 8th floor who are new and in very highly politically charged positions, and they have had a normal life where they could have a social media opinion, and all of a sudden they put something out there and their words blow up, and we all have to learn those lessons too. It's a very interesting learning curve, and then you have to just learn what not to care about. And so in terms of all of those opinions. So, okay, anything else on that table? It was a pretty interesting exercise. Thanks to the clerk for capturing that information for me.
Yeah, we'll add it to a report. We've dreamt for years of creating a report.
Kind of an
Maybe
annual-
that will come to
annual
fruition
report.
this year.
I think it's a great idea. And maybe towards January, before the election gets too hot, but when the year is concluding, you can do a lot of the drafting before the end of the year, but it's a good idea. Okay, so to the last part of our work today, we're gonna go ahead and do our round robin on pending or updating business coming out of new members and what they're doing, or committees that want to discuss legislation. We'll start with you, Cameron.
Let's see, just a couple, well, I announced at the meeting the other day, the March 2021 summit. So just know that's coming, and more to come on that in terms of what that's going to be and how it's going to work. There is going to be a meeting tomorrow to discuss this, but certainly an effort to bring back the Public Safety Commission and a discussion about what that should be and look like, and some effort to engage the public and stakeholders around that to make sure that their voices are involved in the reboot of that. And then I would just also say that on the committee front, really trying to do what was advised to me by this body, and that is to turn committees into places of work, and so an effort to try to establish pre-meetings before both the homeless and housing and the public safety and health meetings, and then really asking heads of departments to bring topics and actions that are relate to assembly action. And so to just continuing to work on that and making sure that those are really productive periods of time. So I just encourage members to attend. If you stopped attending because it was mainly updates, there's going to be an effort to really make those really productive and useful meetings on topics that relate directly to our actions and prior to them coming to the body. So, and then just the last thing is that it relates to our strategic planning document, both from the administration, the homeless sort of priorities that they have, and the public safety priorities. We'll be using those at the committee as well to sort of look at ways to align the work of the assembly and the administration. So being aware of what their priorities are and bringing our priorities to those meetings and using that as a way to make sure that those things are moving forward. So thanks.
Mr. Littlefield.
Thanks. I only have one committee I sit on, in the AMATs, and I'm an alternate, but it's been very, very vigorous in the past few months. It's getting interesting, where the money's gonna come from, whether the feds are gonna support it. So I'm looking forward. We'll see how that goes. And I have a quick question, Clark. Can I still comment on this and send it to you? Because you guys zoomed past it, and I'm still contemplating where I would like to see a possible change, but that's it for me, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I'll briefly pivot since you brought up AMATs, that Ms. Alatel had sent a note kind of about that and some of our priorities to me about how new members will be coming on. Will need a bit of an education about there are committees that are the ones you want to be on, and then there are committees that we ask you to participate on because we need people to do the work. And so AMATs is one that if you have an interest in that fine detailed wonky business, great, because it's so important. And it's something we're going to have to find people for because 2 out of 3 are stepping down. And so this conversation will be starting up here pretty soon again. Thanks, Mr. Johnson. Zach.
Yeah, nothing for me today, thanks.
Right. Daniel.
Nothing, thanks.
Anna.
I'll run through just a few things. One is Mr. Constant and I working on licensing updates for the marijuana code because it hasn't been touched in a while. So I know that I don't know exactly when that's coming out soon, working with the clerk's office on that because they deal with licensing. Site access project that Mr. Boland and I are on. I guess I'm using last names. I mean, we should be using first names. It is going to the Planning and Zoning Commission on March 3rd. I know there's a lot of interest in it. I believe we have another FCC local lens presentation. FCC's been hosting those. They're 1-hour Zoom meetings. They're great. So that'll be available for folks who are interested. And just in general, if you have constituents who want to participate in that, the comment period is actively open, I think, to P&Z. So that's where it is. And it'll come back to the assembly at some point, but that's moving through the process. Comprehensive plan update. I know that was also a topic of interest. I think I shared this on Tuesday, but I'll just briefly say myself, Meg, and Daniel have been meeting with planning since we passed that resolution last June about the plan update. It is slow, but not for lack of interest. They're just really working through what that should look like. And we've said, the May 2025 deadline is not going to happen, and that's okay. Or maybe it was May 24. I don't remember. Anyway, but so that's something to just, if you're interested or you have constituents interested, talk to planning staff because they are going to be leading that. That's not us leading that process. Tax incentives, I'll just share myself. George and Felix are co-sponsors with the mayor's office on that, and that's still being worked on as a draft, but that'll come out soon. And Nolan Clouda would be the best point of contact if you have questions, obviously, because there's 3 of us. On the March, these are other topics too. Joint school board meeting, March 7th. We were just talking this morning and requested putting the youth members resolution on our joint agenda for the 7th, because we've already taken action on it, but it'd be a nice thing to highlight their work and then just kind of talk about next steps from the district. And also I've asked for just time for really them to lead a conversation about legislative updates. We know funding is in there and there's probably other things. So just to say that's out there. And then lastly, on the point of finding folks to serve on committees, another one is Budget and Finance Committee. Myself and Meg are actively looking for a 3rd member to commit to really stepping into Meg's position eventually, but in the meantime, walking with us through the first quarter revision process. I will emphasize that it is not like it was when I first started and we were literally writing the omnibus amendment, but it still takes work, and it is definitely in the category of core functions of the assembly. So someone needs to do that. And it would be really difficult for somebody who's starting brand new on day one to do that. I did that because I was on the Budget Advisory Commission. To my knowledge, none of the folks who are in the running coming up to be new members are in that position. And so the pool is the rest of us who are here. So just putting that out there. I think that's it for now. So thank you.
Anna, can I ask a question real quick? Do you know, my daughter asked me this morning, is the school going to do a mock vote? Do we know whether that's going to happen or not?
I'm not the one to ask that question.
Okay, I just, you brought that up, but
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
didn't
I
know if
don't
the
know.
resolution was going to go. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, this year might be a little iffy, but next year for sure we'll get them there because we asked them to this year, and that communication might take a while to percolate. Felix.
Yeah, sure. So a few things in the hopper. I think last month I talked about how I am worked through my own 2025 goals and areas of interest. And so a lot of things have happened since. First, just want to read for context the vision statement of welcoming Anchorage for a couple of items that I have, or things that I have coming up, not items. Our vision is that Anchorage is a globally competitive, culturally vibrant community where every resident feels a sense of belonging and has equal opportunity to access all the community offers. I really like that vision statement that's included in the Welcoming Anchorage Roadmap. So that leads to a couple of projects that I've been working on. First of them is a book club project that's hopefully going to be under the Welcoming Anchorage brand or under my office. That's to be determined. The first big order of books was done yesterday with a launch of April. There's going to be a hopefully welcoming Anchorage branded podcast, sort of delving into that universe, a new one for me, but something exciting. And that also has an April launch. All of that under sort of the auspices currently of welcoming Anchorage and under a lot of the goals and work that they hope to achieve. There's a public review draft for folks interested of the Midtown District Plan that should be released tomorrow. Not sure when it's going to come to the Assembly, but it may take a little while to go through all of the processes. But that public review draft will be finally out. This is something that Meg and we got funding in 2021 through ARPA funds to get this done. So a few years later, it's finally happening. I am working on these next two items are sort of in inception, but the conversations have been happening and the and Assembly Council is aware of them. I'm working on a fair scheduling ordinance. It's part of really a national movement that's focused on increasing protections for fast food and retail workers in a variety of different areas. So folks are interested in learning more, just Google it. And then also working on some gig/freelance worker protections. That's actually an idea that Daniel shared with me some time ago and finally getting around to it. This is also sort of another national movement to protect freelancers and some other categories of gig workers. There are preemption issues to maneuver through, but that's an area of interest of mine. I have requests, and you might like this one, Chris. I have requested a review of the responsible contractor ordinance that was passed in 2019, which Chris was one of the sponsors of. It might lead to a follow-up ordinance, but main idea here is I just want to understand how that particular ordinance and chapter in our code is being utilized and its efficiency. I've talked to some folks and they're worried that it's might be a chapter of code that doesn't have teeth to it or sufficient teeth to it. So that's something that I'm exploring.
Can I jump there for a sec with you? Yeah. So I'll be happy to join you on that, and I'll let you know that the Title VII updates do kind of touch on this a little bit and expand the definition and where that is applied. But separately in parallel, I am, because that had been on my list, there's another one I want to discuss, which is kind of the implementation of the Community Workforce Agreement Act that we put in. And I think that in some ways they're kind of a parallel and maybe joined. And so just in your thinking, kind of add that, because we now have 5 years and there was supposed to be a 5-year review and it's not happened. And it's code directs us to timely take that question up. So
yeah, no, that's a good one that we should think about. So then next on my list, so I am I've begun to have some conversations around microloan programs. Silk, the Cook Inlet Lending Center, late fourth quarter of last year, they did this really interesting program. It's a Indigenous People Small Business Loan up to $25,000. 50% forgivable if you go through their financial wellness coaching. Some pretty interesting work that they're doing, and they're sort of piloting this program. And I know that there are several parts of our community that could likely benefit from such a program. And so I'm exploring different partnerships of what it might look like to stand up additional pilot programs, whether with Silk or with another entity. In addition, there are some systemic gaps in that whole world, particularly around if you're looking at credit counseling and a few other areas where most other jurisdictions have some type of business development guru that works in a lot of these areas that helps small businesses, but we don't have that here. So we have a lot of folks working on the policy side of things, but we don't have someone, what I've called, working on the street level side of things. So that's certainly, I think, discussions that I'll be having with the administration. Fun project that I'm working on with the MLK Foundation. So after MLK Day, there was a constituent who came up to me. I don't even remember his name. He came up to me in the parking lot, as so often happens to us. And he said that it would be really great if there were flagpoles stood up at the MLK Memorial. And so I reached out to MLK Foundation, and they are generally supportive of the idea. So going through that whole process of meeting with the South Addition Community Council probably in March. So you guys might see me there, North Anchorage folks. And coming to them with some cost estimates and maybe some renderings of what it might look like. Who knew that 3 flagpoles, 30-foot flagpoles, would cost $40,000? But that's where it's at right now. As was discussed at the legislative committee, there is a resolution from Randy Salt and I that you'll see on the agenda to support HB 13. It gives local governments flexibility with certain categories of tax incentives. And I'll just leave it at that broad description, and you'll see that on the agenda for the February 25th meeting. Working a little bit in the manufactured housing community space, working on an ordinance with the administration that's probably 5-6 months down the line on some policy levers that they're hoping to pull to help make it easier to rehab/build new manufactured housing communities. Also realize totally that there are significant impediments to manufactured housing communities. And so looking at a lot of the issues that were raised in that recent report that was approved by the Assembly or adopted by the Assembly. Meg and I are working on the National Archives RFP, which should hopefully be coming out soon. I think we've given our final round of edits to them, and then it's up to them to get it out, and we'll see what comes of it. Unless otherwise stated, just as a general point of fact, most of these things I'm working on my own, and I'm happy to work with others on them. On the committee side, briefly, I gave the audit committee update on Tuesday, and then I, just to put it on everyone's radar, intend to begin the larger ranked choice voting conversation in that committee in May. Thanks.
Okay, great. Can I join the HB 13 as a co-sponsor for the 25th? I won't be here to vote on it. I'm sorry, but I would like to be a part of that. So I have quite the list, as you can imagine, as I wind up. So first, I'm going to start with something that's coming your way, members, so you know why it's coming your way. The online checkbook is a great tool to stay out abreast of municipal finances. So our CFO and treasurer are likely going to be reaching out to you in small groups to tell you how they look at the online checkbook as a tool. So, right, we get those reports at Budget and Finance Committee meetings. We're trying to absorb a ton of information on the fly. So they want to make their reports more useful and really ground them back into this public portal. So if you get that invitation, I really recommend you take up that. And we did cancel the February Budget and Finance Committee meeting, so they might be using that window. Related to Midtown Federal Archives, we did get some funding for I would call it an expedited Cuddy master plan to move alongside the district plan, and in conjunction with the RFP, so that there won't be hopefully interface issues between the park and a potential new development. We'll have gone through that public process. I am a little disappointed that the Midtown plan won't come for a vote before I leave the body, but maybe you'll see me at the podium. And I am working on a project to look at the use table, particularly for payday lending institutions. Right now, they're allowed in B3, but possibly add a conditional use process for them. They tend to be quite usury and go into very specific neighborhoods. I am looking for partners who would be interested in a project. I'm very interested in my short time in exploring place making and naming with the native village of Eklutna to get beyond parks, whether that's streets or other official municipal things. I've seen it happen, particularly in the Yukon for First People in Canada. I think it would be a really great way to expand the efforts we've had. It'd probably be some exploratory conversations with the native village of Eklutna and possibly a resolution saying how it would be explored over time before I leave, but there would need to be members who would want to pick up that mantle. Moving forward on pre-approved building plans for an ADU with Mark. Claire has been spearheading this thing and bringing everyone into alignment. It's been really great to watch. So it's very excited. We are like almost over the finish line. Some really, really good stuff there. So just watch for that to come. A quick search of the portal tells me I've brought 5 emergency ordinances, 135 ordinances, and over 500 resolutions, which I thought was interesting. And then on the 4th and the 18th, you'll see a lot of stuff from me, just as I'm really trying to work through. You'll see a resolution about referring to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the question of whether neighborhood and district plans should be advisory or elements of the comp plan, as well as how Girdwood, Eagle River, Chugiak should be able to initiate comp plan process. Really, that's a referral for planning and zoning to do the work. You'll see an ordinance with the mayor's office on one of those 2 dates that addresses the appeals around. Right now, a member of the public can appeal basically a permit, and it's very costly. So we're revamping what those fees and that standing, like who can bring those in light of a recent Supreme Court decision, really picking up the work that Kevin Cross did. Also, an ordinance will be coming either on the 4th or the 18th for introduction about the comprehensive plan amendment process and refining basically making more tiers, more levels of amendment, and similarly in AR that will be companion using those same tiers around the design criteria manual. And then Chris and I, with the help of our outside counsel, legislative and assembly council, have really revamped the public records part of code, really mostly to bring it in alignment with state law and to require kind of affirmative action instead of just, well, we've all heard the stories. You put in your request and you wait. So that should be close to introduction either on maybe the 25th, but more likely the 4th to be set for public hearing. Okay, thanks.
Madam Clerk.
Thanks. I just have a quick statement that Randy wanted read. His apologies for not being here, and he appreciates this statement being communicated regarding the property tax escalation limitation AR with the release of property tax appraisal notifications. We all have received inquiries regarding the recent increase in appraisals. My goal in this ask is simple. I would like to encourage our state legislators to look at other states for potential options that may limit escalation. While this AR references Florida as an example, many other states have enacted such legislation, providing options for municipalities to enact should they believe it is best suited option for their citizens. I hope you will join me in improving this AR and ultimately passing it. Thank you.
Anna.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Just for context, that was a draft resolution that Member Solt brought to the Legislative Committee that just happened. I know some of us were there. But if you weren't there or you're interested, you can look online at the website or just go back and watch the discussion of that. So thanks, Jamie.
Right, and on my list of things, so obviously working with Meg on the Title VII updates, and that's coming in ASAP. You should see it on the next agenda, I think. Bill, I think, introduced it overnight. So then I would note procedurally on March 7th, we have a special meeting in which we're taking up a marijuana license issue. And so everyone just make sure you mark your calendars. It's a substantial issue and we will be dealing with that at that time. There may be some more information coming your way soon. We have let the petitioner know that 10 business days before we have the process, we will be communicating to them the process that we'll be going through. So it's still being refined. You'll see it when they see it. So we'll all know what we're doing on that day. Next, there's kind of a conversation happening right now between the Boys and Girls Club and the municipality about severing their operation of the Boys and Girls Club in Mountain View. And so there may be a request for a special meeting next week to approve some funding for the Boys and Girls Club to facilitate their process. But I don't know. It's a quickly moving target between myself, Mr. Volant, the Municipal Manager's Office, Parks, and the petitioner, the operator. The ranked choice conversation may be coming sooner than May. And so there is a process that I have been in discussion with that may bring it before us before then. So just FYI. I also have asked the traffic director to provide a policy on the use of traffic cameras at our intersections. We got a report recently that pretty soon they'll have them at every intersection in town. There's some 200, they're gonna have 280. And you might be surprised to know there's really no policy around that. And that's not good from a due process perspective, from a privacy perspective, from a number of perspectives. And this is not traffic cameras like enforcement. This is just at the intersections. We have cameras now tracking all of the movement of cars. And we have no policy guidance on rules of engagement for use of that footage. So I'm working with the traffic director to come forward to us with the draft policy and see if it passes muster. Then I'm also working with the IT director on a kind of a deep dive back into the open government portal, the open checkbook, the online checkbook, to see if when we upgrade to the S4 HANA for SAP, if we can get a better tool in which we can actually host the contracts themselves in a servable manner like we do with the portal for assembly records, resolutions, and AOs, so that we can avoid the requirement to have a member of the body, a member of the public ask a member of the administration for a public record and then be stonewalled for months, never see the document or have to fight for the document, which is kind of part of the open records conversation that Ms. Zalto and I are kind of introducing soon, but it's separate. I'm trying to figure out a way to get humans out of the way when the records are the public's. So get us to store them anyhow. So I'm working on that so that we no longer have this weird dynamic. Instead, you can just pull it up and see what the terms are, as long as it's public. If the information is confidential, it'll be redacted, that kind of thing. And I think that that's really the breadth of kind of the big picture stuff I'm really ready to talk about today. There's obviously a dozen little things happening all the time. Oh, I'm sorry, George. You are out of mind. Out of sight, out of
Hey,
mind.
thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't have anything to update folks on
Right.
today. Thank you, Chair.
And Karen?
Yep, thank you. A couple of things, of course, you all have seen about the AO 2025-25 and AO 25-28, 48-hour reporting for lost and stolen weapons, and the principal responsibility if a weapon comes to school going to parents, and that has been public hearing will be April 8th, work session April 3rd. I have been told by Chief Case that the department supports it, and we're working on a resolution with ASD. If anybody wants to join me on that, I would appreciate it. Other things that I will not get done, but I have been poking around in is I had an email from a constituent that is a disabled veteran, and he described to me how the tax exemption for disabled veterans has not close to kept pace with inflation. And I confirmed with Jack Adamus that it's really become ridiculous. So that's nothing that I will be able to get through on my time on the body. But if anyone's interested, we should take a look. Similarly, I've been looking into Z tags, and Glenn Cipriano did a fabulous spreadsheet of what financial impact that would have if we allowed people to do the $25 registration fee for older vehicles. And I think it's 8 years old and older. The first 2 years, we would actually gain money. And then after that, we would take like close to a $2 million hit a year. He's got some poking around. He's got some information coming from the state of Alaska. That money comes to us. So potentially that could be bad, but we also, everyone that I talked to didn't even know that we received the money. So it was kind of funny. That is something that if anybody wants to take a look at, definitely won't get through that. I've been looking, and I haven't done anything on this other than to send an email to Mike Braniff, but I've had a lot of people emailing about the possible impacts if they cut certain sports from high schools. And some of them have pretty considerable user fees that they give the municipality. And, just wondering the impacts that would have, and if there's a possibility that we might consider lowering those rental fees, and so that we're still getting that income, or kids are still getting their sport. So that is more to come on that. Meg and Felix and I are looking into the TED project. Nothing will happen on that while I'm still on the body, but I'm very interested in grocery store on Tudor Road. And finally, LaborMax met with me about wanting the possibility of having a contract with the MOA to do day labor at shelters. Currently, they are going to Davis Park and other places and offering opportunities for employment. They have the liability insurance and the equipment, and they do the training. I've met with HR, and I've met with Ms. Browse and the mayor, and it kind of comes down to, it's a slow moving thing. It was tried under Mayor Berkowitz and failed because of bad operator. I think it could be a great way to make baby steps of getting people back into the work world. So if anyone wants to help me work on that, I really would love to see that happen before I leave, but I'd like to see a lot of things happen. And then I just want to say one final thing. I didn't say anything at the meeting, but I really want to shout out. I echo completely Zach's comments about the things that get laid on the table last minute and not having a chance and feeling caught off guard somewhat. And so if we can really try to not put those things out there, I think it would help all of us. And then I have a comment also about public safety. I listened to Cameron, you earlier talk about how, you want to run things through there. I need to know, do I email you? Do I face-to-face you? How do I make sure that I get on those agendas? It seems like it's kind of a difficult thing. Thanks.
Okay, Karen, are you still there? Did you drop off? Oh, fell off. So I'm just gonna say to the point that she made there at the end, and I understand the frustration when last minute things come and everybody has to do their math for themselves, but there is no process by which a member can be blocked from making a motion to amend, period, full stop, ever, right? Unless we change the code and we find some way in which there is a right to sever a member's ability to make a motion, which at that point you could just vote it down if you have 8 votes to achieve that vote, which it would be a super majority vote. The reality is every member can at any time make a motion, and I will protect your right to do that, Karen. So I just was kind of coming in to say that to your comment about the frustration on process, last minute amendments, even complex amendments, as much as I understand that feeling, because nobody likes to be surprised, you as a member, every member has a right to make a motion to amend at any time under Robert's rules, under our code, under just legislative jurisprudence across history in America. You have a right, and that's the right you earned when you stood for election and won. And so I will not make moves that would restrict your right to make a motion. And so I think what's being asked for, though, is consideration and make space. And if you have something, come and get it before the members so they can think about it and have the time. So that's the real thing there. There's just, I will defend your right to be a jerk right till the end, because it's your right. And also I'll promote you getting the information to your peers in a way that gives them an opportunity to understand so they can make an informed decision. And so that's just a philosophical approach, but yeah, go ahead, Felix.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I accidentally
You dropped the
hit
mic.
the hang up instead of unmute.
We heard you drop the mic. It's all good. We had a good laugh.
Yeah, thanks. So I just, history repeats itself. I remember when Chris and I first joined the body, and Suzanne, the three of us also had, I think, a similar consternation when we joined the body of, oh man, we're getting this big, either an S version or an amendment, and what the heck, you can't drop this stuff on us at the last minute, Dick. And basically Dick's response, Dick Cheney to, yes, I should have finished that name, thanks. Dick's response to at least me was, well, Felix, just put your big boy pants on, which is very Dick Cheney. But I'm very glad that we are, I think, evolved from that into, I think, trying to be a little bit more considerate. Thanks.
Definitely tricky. And the rights of the member shall not be abridged. It is a core value, and that's the bottom line. Unless 8 members say it's so, then it is so. That is also in the rules. So thank you, everybody.
Hey, Chris, can I
go
make
ahead,
one
Cameron.
closing comment before we?
Yeah,
go?
please.
I want to just put something on for a future agenda, because it's something you said earlier that I want to understand. You said, we don't have as much staff as the administration, right? You said we don't have as many staff as administration, and that there's a constant narrative of we're an equal branch of government. And I think especially as we're looking at bringing 4 new members on, maybe it's in the Assembly 101, but I'm really struggling with whether we have a clear sense of what the ideal role that we play. Because it's not the same as the administration. So it's this equal doesn't mean the same, right? And so this idea of building up our staff and being able to do, like, at what point is that how big is too big, right? And so I'm curious about that, because I think we have different opinions about roles. But I am curious if in our trainings or that sort of thing, there's any best practices out there or some information about that sort of thing that would be helpful as new people come on about sort of the role of a city council member or a assembly member, like what that role is. So I just want to see that, because I think that we're able to do whatever we want. And I think you're elected officials, but I do think that there's probably some best practices out there that we might be including as we bring new folks on.
So we're not a city council. The assembly is an interesting thing. We're both a city and a county. And so we have multiple domains of jurisdiction. And yes, you're 100% correct that we have a different job than they do. And my comment wasn't that we don't have that we want an equal staff. That wasn't my point. But my point was, be careful calling us large, because we're not. And that's a perception that could be generated But I can tell you our support staff are fewer than 20 for the entire, or 25, than the entire legislative branch, including clerk, elections, ombudsman, and law. It's tight little operation. Meg.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to be at the March rules, and then who knows what April will bring. But I've looked a lot into budget equity between not the branches of government writ large, but from the political part of the administration, the special assistants, those pieces, and the mechanisms that make that go. And we're getting close with our current staffing if we want to think about it. Pay wise, there's still a little bit, but that's how I view it in terms of like, what do those special assistants do? What is, the comms person for the mayor, her executive assistant, really looking at it as the elected portion of the mayor's office. And then, because we're a fully elected body. So I've deep dove into that. So one quick little interesting thing, we pay an intergovernmental charge to the mayor's office, which is interesting. They do not pay an intergovernmental charge to us because the mayor's office only exists through intergovernmental charges. But we should possibly, because it has to exist. But guess what? We have to exist too. And so there's some really interesting ways that strong mayor form of government has really embedded itself in ways that never contemplated anything besides, quite frankly, a part-time legislative body. And so as you look at what the role might be, I would also encourage folks who are interested in this to look at the resources and that equity between the two branches of government. I don't think of them, when I think of co-equal branches of government, I don't think of the implementation portion of it. I think of the political entity that is the mayor's office and ours when we think that way. So anyway, it's just some of the research I've done. It was one of my goals. It will be one of those projects. Does not come to fruition, but there's some good information, and I've brought Matt Farina through on a lot of that.
I would add to that, I have been in discussions with Assembly Council to provide some guidance on the roles of the Assembly in our functions, in particular, certain quasi-judicial functions. What does that mean? How does it work? What is our role legislatively? And so that conversation has been top of mind because in the past, there was a time when we had a lack of kind of hewing to their lane, and we've kind of by necessity did more, and we've been working hard to hew right to our lane. But that said, as one member suggested just now, a fundamental difference from us and every other legislative body and major legislative body in the state is you don't get a staff person, right? You get a tiny little amount of money that you could pay someone to help you, which we've all know what that means. It means you get someone a little tiny bit of time. And so you are your own staff. It's a very interesting and kind of an awesome conversation when you think about it. And so we'll get that on the agenda. Anyone else? Mark.
Thanks. Meg's reference to comp plans, it pinged my memory bank. Last year, we started the Chugach Eagle River Comp Plan. It was half funded. Planning was looking for other money, and they found the other money, so I don't have to arm wrestle anybody during Q1. So we're going forward with that. It's just really exciting news for us.
Yeah. And, there's a potential new member in the audience, and we were discussing how Assembly members sometimes get forced into making very difficult decisions with no information. And it used to be the practice that your first vote when you got on the Assembly was you had to vote on the first quarter budget revision and levy taxes. And you had no idea what you were doing, and no briefing and no study, and you did not draft the documents, and you weren't working on it for the last year. And so we have adopted a practice of changing the order of the day to take up the certification after we take up the first quarter budget revisions, so that the last acts really of the outgoing members are informed on the most important topic that we have, which is how are we levying the taxes in this municipality. And so we have been working to cut back on this idea of thrusting people into big decisions without full information, because it's not right. So, okay. Anything else? No, hearing, seeing none, we'll be adjourned. Thanks, everybody. I think I missed Calvin.